Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. The Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, has officially announced the dates for Nigeria's 2027 general elections, marking a major step in preparations for the country's next electoral cycle. At a press conference held in Abuja on Friday, INEC Chairman Professor Joash Amokutan disclosed that the Presidential and National Assembly elections will take place nationwide on Saturday, February 20, 2027. The electoral body also fixed Saturday, March 6, 2027 for the governorship and state houses of assembly elections. Speaking during the briefing, Professor Amokutan said the decision to set the election dates followed consultations with stakeholders and the provisions of the 1999 Constitution as amended and the Electoral Act 2022. He explained that constitutional timelines require election notices to be published within specific windows tied to the expiry of incumbent mandates. Joining us on this show to discuss the new timetable set by INEC amid the reactions to the Electoral Act regarding the real-time transmission of results is Samson Itodo, Executive Director, Yaga Africa. Good morning, Samson. Good to see you again.
Good morning, Dr. Abate, Ayo, and
Good
Rufai.
morning, Samson.
Good morning, Samson. Morning.
Okay, very quickly. I mean, over the weekend, we had the INEC chairman announcing the election timetable and schedule of activities, which he said, you know, it's based on the Constitution, the Electoral Act 2022, and the guidelines and regulations of INEC. But however, at paragraph 11, he made the point that, well, paragraph 8, not 11, 8, he made the point that, okay, all of this will still depend on what the National Assembly decides at the end of the day. The National Assembly is meeting today to harmonize. It is meeting tomorrow to consider another issue, namely the objections by Muslim stakeholders that the timetable is going to clash with the Ramadan season in 2027. What's your take on all of this and then the implications for turnout? Because what the Islamic stakeholders, Muslim Rights Council and others are saying is that turnout will be an issue. And you had previously published a report, Yaga Africa did, on turnout, on with regard to the 2027 elections and the people's enthusiasm, about the elections. Can you help us tie all of this together?
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Abate. Quite an assortment of issues, but let's take them one after the other, beginning with INEC's release of the timetable. As far as the law is concerned, INEC has not erred by releasing the timetable last week because it was performing a statutory duty placed on it by virtue of Section 28 of the extant law, which is the 2022 Electoral Act. It requires INEC to publish the timetable for elections 360 days before the date of an election. Secondly, INEC was also fulfilling a constitutional responsibility because the Constitution is clear by setting the time frame for conducting elections, and it provides that elections shall hold not earlier than 150 days and not later than 30 days to the end of the tenure of the incumbent holding that particular office. And it's pursuant to that INEC fixed February 20th, 2027 for the Presidential and National Assembly election. So INEC did not in any way err in law. It has performed its own duty. Secondly, and to the paragraph you referenced, is the fact that, Dr. Abate, you guys on Arise for over 2 years kept calling on the National Assembly to conclude the amendments process. Civil society called on the National Assembly. The reason why we were all making this call for early conclusion of the amendments is to provide for legal certainty to facilitate planning. Now we are actually dealing with a crisis before us because this same political elite refused to conclude this process. Now we have been boxed to a corner where INEC has issued a timetable, but in the same statement, referencing the fact that the National Assembly has not concluded the amendment because INEC is cognizant of the fact that a section of the National Assembly altered timelines in its own version of the bill. Therefore, it was unclear and uncertain that even if INEC was going ahead because it was performing its own duty, that timetable that was released last week was going to be the same timetable that would regulate all the activities before 2027. We all know, and every Nigerian knows as of today, that timetable will be revised, and INEC will have to issue a revised timetable, not just because of this issue that have been raised with respect to its conflict with religious observances, but because the Senate, in its own version of the bill, already altered timelines relating to the nomination of candidates, the publication of the list of candidates, as well as the conduct of primaries. So whether this came up or not, if the Senate version was to be adopted, we would have still revised the timetable elections. Now to the point about, where we are as of today, that the National Assembly reconvenes tomorrow to deal with the issue, of conflict in dates. My first response to this is we must recognize that we're a secular state. And I have, concerns that when we start altering timelines for secular activities like elections on the basis of religious consideration, we might be boxing ourselves into a very difficult situation. Because some of the dates being referenced are dates that are not static, they always change. And so if, we are making this consideration and you look at the Constitution, it's either the elections will now hold in January or they will hold after the fasting season, because it's not just the Muslim fasting season, we also have the Lenten period. In 2023, the elections held on the 25th of February. 3 days earlier, that's 22nd, was Ash Wednesday. So we were actually in an election during the Lenten season. And so when you think about it and you look at the calendar and you see how this date shifts, it then means that if we're going to be having elections whether it's Muslim or Christian fasting is taking place, then there won't be certainty with respect to the timetable for elections. And that might actually hurt or hamper the way we prepare for elections. So I wish the National Assembly well tomorrow when they convene, but they must be guided by public interest in a way that we don't complicate, and make it difficult for the election management body to work within certain tight timeframes. But I suspect that the next elections might be in January and not February, because if you move it further, the Ramadan is 30 days, the Christian Lenten season is 40 days. They are 2 weeks apart. So if you fix the election after Easter, you would have approximately 29 days to the deadline. And 29 days is too narrow because you need to conduct the elections. What if there is runoff? What if you have reruns? So it becomes very tight. So let's wait to see what happens. But whatever the outcome of this, it will definitely have implications, one for the legitimacy of the elections, but also to how citizens perceive that their voices count in this entire policy-making process.
Thank you so much, Samson. Maybe we should have elections during fasting season, just so that, we're a religious nation. People are pious during that period. It might reduce incidents of electoral malpractice if we held it when people are supposed to be very holy. Maybe that's an option to consider. But that's on a light note. Let me ask you a question. You put a piece, I read it, on confusion as political strategy, and I think that's quite interesting. You cited some of these, things you talked about around the potential revision of election dates, the budget cycle, defending of budgets, the lateness, and the fact that when would money be released. And you said, indeed, it looks like an engineered crisis, or 2027 is being engineered for crisis. Can you break this down further? Could it be that perhaps this is, like you've mentioned, a political strategy, confusion, making the process tedious, difficult, because when you're solving one matter, they throw up another. Initially was the electoral bill, amendment bill. Now they brought in fasting period as another issue. Now they've looked at, the dates will not be possible. Then funding, when are we going to release it? Please share deep further on that.
Well, thanks, Ayo. The truth is, if you read the handwriting on the wall, like the Holy Bull said, Neme, Neme, I've forgotten that particular quote. But when Tekel Opasin, if you read the handwriting on the wall, it is clear that there's a section of the political class that is leveraging this chaos because they want to not just undermine the elections, but because they really want to create confusion as a strategy of seeking political power. It makes no sense that 2 years, for 2 years we've debated this reform, and yet we're at this particular point. So we've not concluded the amendments. This amendment, we hope it's concluded this week. The president has sent to it. First, there's already a confusion regarding timetable. The budget for the 2027 election has not been passed. The chairman just defended the budget last week. So when will the budget be passed? In February. When will the funds be released to INEC? And the chairman also said, that the success of elections is contingent on how funding is released. And we know, even in the 2023 elections, that INEC did not receive all the funding it required for that particular election. So when you check all the confusion in this particular polity, it's just clear that a section of the political class, and I wouldn't say all the members of the political class, but a section of the political class are leveraging confusion because they know very well that when there is confusion, they overstretch our institutions. Our accountability institutions now make it difficult. It makes it difficult for them to hold them to account. They overstretch and overwhelm us as citizens. Every single week, we wake up to one absurdity within our polity just to discourage citizens from asking questions so they don't show up at elections. And before you know it, we are recording less than 25% turnout because citizens don't trust the process. And manipulation is easier when people don't show up. And so when you look at all this confusion, I say it was avoidable if and only if a section of our political class, particularly political leadership, placed public interest over and above their partisan interest. And that is why we are where we are today. And it's just unfortunate. And if anything happens to the 2027 elections, no one should blame citizens. No one should blame the media. No one should blame our religious institutions. The blame should rest with the political class who have actually gotten us into this mess.
Samson, strong man. You think Nigerian politicians that only looting and stealing is in their head, you think they want to make the process better? These ones are not ready. It's how they are going to steal, get into power, steal the budget that is not enough for the people, loot. That's what is in their head. Don't think of anything altruistic. The reason why they are in politics in the first place is because they want to steal. There's a matter that I'm more concerned about. And if we don't get clarity on this matter, I think we should forget anything called transparency in that election, but we should come out and vote. Is with what they're about to pass, which most likely, they will likely pass what the Senate has passed, where they gave a proviso for manual collation, because we know them in and out. That's how they behave. Will the IREV, will it be justiciable with what the Senate passed? Because if we cannot use the IREV to get judgment on election results in court, let's forget it, because you and I know something. No political party will be able to get over 176,794 EC8A forms to defend election results. I've asked two lawmakers the question. Webboy said both are justiciable, EC8A and IREV. What's the result on IREV? Honorable Balogun couldn't answer the question. Will IREV results be justiciable?
Well, Rufai, that's a very difficult question. I tell you, after 20 years of studying law at different levels, sometimes I wonder, how we make our laws and how we interpret our laws. It is just clear. So there are different canons of interpretation. When you apply the simplest, and perhaps you call the literal definition or literal interpretation, or maybe adopt even the mischief rule of interpretation, you ask yourself, that proviso, what mischief was it meant to cure? I understand that there's a section that believes strongly that technologies are not insulated from either breakdown or vulnerabilities. They do have their vulnerabilities. But that proviso was just unnecessary. And it's really confusing because what it does, it places or establishes a hierarchy of results. It means that the results, the EC8A, the manually recorded result sheets, will take precedence over and above that transmitted electronically. This is why that legislative overkill is just unacceptable. The House of Reps should not, it's not even a debatable issue. We don't need that proviso. And what this clearly tells us is that you want to give with the right hand and then take with the left hand. So to your question, whether this will be justiciable, quite frankly, it is that particular proviso is unambiguous. And I would say that it does not in any way confer legitimacy, on the electronically transmitted result. Because even if you say that results shall be transmitted electronically, and you go ahead and say what will take precedence is the EC8A, we know that in Nigeria, it is the default position is in that proviso and not in the preceding text in that particular law.
Very briefly, there is a notable mischief in the amendment as it has been treated. Do you think that a joint conference committee of the National Assembly meeting today will be able to resolve that mischief? And that mischief is around retransmission. What are they likely to come up with? Is the House of Reps likely to just go along with the Senate or not? And then secondly, you refer to the budget of the of INEC. INEC is asking for 873 billion, strictly for the 2027 election. The 2026 budget is separate from it. That one is about 171 billion. By the time you add everything that INEC is looking for, you are talking about over 1 trillion. Do you think they will get the money? Or that may be a problem? Briefly.
Well, if experience is something to go by, then I doubt if INEC will get all this money before the next election, because even the 2023 elections, 1 year or 2 years after the elections, INEC didn't secure all its funding. Think about the state of the economy as at today. But Dr. Abati, to your question about the position of the conference committee, Nigerians are looking forward to the outcome of the conference committee's meeting today. And we hope that they will adopt the House provision, because that's consistent with citizens' demand, and that's where Nigeria should be. But Dr. Abati, my biggest worry and concern is that there seems to be, a controversy from the institutions that provide this data. So how come that in 2022, NCC told INEC that 93% of polling units have network coverage? And it appears that 3 years after...
Some say it's 97%.
Okay, 97.
97. That's what NCC told
97.
Them. Yeah, they have 2 or 3G network. Yeah,
3-4 years, yeah. 3-4 years after, the same NCC, and I have it on good authority because senators have told me, in fact, up till last night, that based on data available to them from the same NCC, that we don't have that level of coverage. And it's on the basis of that they made that particular proposal. So it just tells you that there is a deliberate, effort either to misinform or to capture this entire process. It's just clear to the whole of Nigerians that there's a section of the political class that are scared of electronic transmission of results because it limits human interference and limits their election rigging schemes. It is just clear. Let's read the handwritings on the wall. Because if you care about electoral transparency and the credibility of the 2027 elections, then every politician who is on the ballot should be interested about the credibility of the process that brings them up. Because at the end of the day, we all will benefit if the process is transparent. But it's just obvious they are scared of electronic transmission because they know it will limit their schemes and their election rigging schemes, to be specific.
On that note, thank you very much, Samson Itodo.